Hi everyone, welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is Nahal. I'm the founder of Yoga Avec Moi, and today we have a question that we are going to answer. How do you deal with SOS situations or emergency situations, specifically with your emotions? Like, what do you do? I received this question several weeks ago, so thank you for your patience for the one who asked it. We just finished the conference, so now I have some free time to be able to do it, and with joy I am making this video. So, I wanted to start off basically with a story. When I was in university, I took a healthcare team development course. It was by far one of the most amazing courses I've ever taken in my life. And what it was basically a course to see how you organize people in an effective and efficient way so that people don't die. So if you're in like a neurology ward or like an emergency ward, to basically decrease the patient health outcomes by teams working better together. So we were all like undergraduate students, so none of us were really fully anything. Some of them were actually in their practicum or whatever of these fields, which was like a social worker, a nurse, a physician, a pharmacist, like different things, right? And one of the first things that they got us to do was to basically assess how we deal with conflict. How do we behave under, like, normally? How do we behave for team effectiveness? And then it was like the stages of how you behave when you're in a conflict situation. And what was super enlightening for me is like, and there were like these colors of this thing. I really wish I remembered like what kind of test this was to like get you guys to do it too. But maybe if anyone knows by my description of it, please let me know in the comments below. But it was basically, it had these colors. It had like blue, red, green, and yellow. And one of the things was like, under a normal circumstances, how would you be? And I remember being like blue and red, like being super, and blue was representing like emotion and like feeling oriented and all these things. And red was like very decisive, like leadership, like getting things done, like, you know, bam, bam, bam. And green was like super logical, super analytical, super like detail oriented and things like that. And then yellow was something like organizational skills. For some of them, like, you didn't have all of the colors. So under normal circumstances, I was like red and like blue. Like, I would get things done, but I would never do it at the expense of people's feelings. So I was like, I'm always about like, let's do this, you know, but let's also be kind and loving to everyone. A lot of people had this trait, but then there was also like people who had like all green, all blue, all red, just like, get it done. You know, it was like, and no feeling whatsoever to do with it in the process. But so these were people under normal circumstances, and under stressful situations, basically I found out that first thing I go through is green. I'm like purely green, where I'm like purely logical, purely analytical. And then after that, if under your logic you're not able to stay there long, or people are still not like understanding you, then for me it was like I would get angry. Like, I would go into red. And then if my anger didn't work, then I would get emotional and start to cry. But this was actually not the pattern of the majority of the people that were in the class. And I don't want to say I was the only one with this order when it came to a conflict, but it was definitely in the minority of like the first response, it being logical. Usually people's first response is anger, is red first. Or a couple of people had also like emotion, like blue as their first like color. And so this is something that also is relevant to this video, because what I want everyone in this video to actually think about is like, when you get into a conflict situation, if you have the options of being logical, being angry, or being emotional, which are the first emotions that you go to usually when you're first getting into a conflict? You're like noticing things are bothering you a little bit. Where do you go? And so for me, it was really wonderful to learn that because, I mean, later on I worked in infectious diseases and disaster control. So to have this trait of first going into logic is super helpful. However, when it comes to relationships, it can be a little jarring and cold because when you're getting into a conflict with someone usually wants you to feel like some sort of emotion or like, you know, like they want to get in a fight with you. And I'm like not responsive. I'm purely logical, just trying to get things done basically. And so people, at least like I remember one time when my brother, he was like clearly trying to provoke me. And I had learned like this course and learned a little bit more about myself. And this trait kind of became even more apparent over time that like when conflict happens, I go straight to logic. So I actually become like super unemotional. And it can really seem jarring to people who know Nahal to be super warm, super loving, super all about feelings, and then suddenly go into like logic. It just feels like you're like pulling the plug, and people are like, oh my god, they kind of almost like think that I'm like an assassin, that I'm about to like kill someone because they're like, oh my god, she's so calm that like it's like as if she has like a knife underneath her that's just about to jab someone. But it's like, no, it's like really what it's about. I'm just trying to solve the situation as quickly as possible by removing my emotions so that we can see the picture clearly. But when it comes to getting tasks done at work, this is a super helpful trait. But when it comes to romantic relationships or like family relationships where they want to see that you care, and then the first response you have is super logical, that can almost seem like you don't really care so much, right? So first thing is basically in this video, first identify in yourself, if you get into a conflict situation, which of the three do you go into first? Like logic, anger, or emotion? And know the order of which, so that if like one of your tactics doesn't work, where do you go to next? Like, so if it's like anger is your first thing, do you get emotional next? Or you're like, all right, after I like release my anger, then I can quickly calm down and like do it? Or is it like after your anger, you get emotional and then only then you're able to get logical? So the reason why I say this is because it's super important for us to know the order of our conflict situation. So this is for that. So in this situation that was presented to me as a scenario was that this person was in a situation with a group of people, and somebody had said something that really triggered them and made them feel super hurt, and they started like crying and quietly in the corner. And some people saw in the group, it was a small room, and it wasn't a situation where they could leave, and they were like, all right, what do I do? What kind of breathing practices do I do? Like what kind of tactics and things like that? And the first response I gave them was that in a situation like this, you do not want to focus on your breath, because the breath will make you cry more. And I'm assuming if you're anyone like me, where it's like if someone really hurt you in a situation, you don't really want to show your emotions in the public sphere. To like, you just want to go and cry in a corner and like, you know, like deal with yourself and then come back with words, cogent words, and like do it and not be like, oh my god, that hurt my feelings, like, you know. So I was under this, I was like, usually, and especially if you need to stay in that environment longer, like you don't want, it's not the time to really like breathe through it, because the breathing will actually induce a release of emotions, which is usually crying. And if you're going to be embarrassed to do that, then you would not want to focus on your breath. So what I would recommend in this circumstance is what you would do instead, since you were in a study sort of situation, is to actually write things down and talk to your like inner child. Is like to speak to your inner child. First is to give comfort. First and foremost is to like kind of like hold mentally in your mind, even though you're in a public situation, is to hold your inner child, like love them the way you would normally love, how you like to receive love. So if it's like your inner child, like think of when you were a kid, like how did you love to receive love, right? for me, like the example is like head on my chest and like bear hug sort of situation, right? So if this is your way, then you would like basically envision like holding your inner child, and just like trying to comfort her and trying to tell her it's okay, give her mental rub on her back, and just hold her and like ask her what she needs when she's like calm, right? Because when someone's in like a state, you don't really get them to talk. You calm them down. Soothing is first, and bringing them comfort, right? Because when people are in their amygdala, which is like the part of their brain which is like fear and survival, they're not cogent, like to get them to speak about their feelings in like a cogent manner. So you kind of have to allow this period to subside so that they can come into their frontal cortex, so that they can actually like think of solutions and like compassionate ways to like deal with the situation, or think of creative solutions, right? So that's one. Like, I would not think of the breath practices, but I would do the inner child, like, loving practices and stuff like that. So that's the main thing that I would do. And if it's hard to do it in your mind in an environment like that, you would want to do it by writing, because you had the bounty of like having like paper around you. So I would just be writing question and answer period to talk to myself. Hey, how am I doing? I just want to say I love you. You're okay. We're going to talk about this. What she said was awful. What I see. You like recognize, you acknowledge that what that person said to you was hurtful, and I don't think she meant it like that, or her tone was really awful, like, or that was really embarrassing for you. I can see. It's like, first you want to acknowledge that what you went through was like actually traumatic, and just kind of like name it, almost like pin it down. And that's what I would do if you're in a situation like that, is to like solve it in that way. But then one of the other things was shared was that like the shock of this situation, of how it felt within them. Like, where did it come from? Like, I think it was like ancestral. I think it was this. If you think it was ancestral, please do watch my video on what is ancestral trauma, and a couple tips on like how to basically like learn about it and go into it a little deeper. But okay, so ancestral trauma aside, it just being like an air pocket coming out, and like just like a release of some sort. There was also the comment that like later on they would need to still see this person every single day, and the shock of how they responded and how they dealt with it was something that was really traumatic. And so they're like, I have to see this person every day, so what do I do? So one of the things that I wanted to actually share with you is that many people know about the 5 love languages that we have. And if you don't already, I will leave a link down in the comment section below to check to see what your love languages are, right? But the thing here that is not a lot of people know about the same guy, Gary Chapman, who did the 5 love languages series. He also has a test that to see your apology languages. Like, what are the levels or methods or basically categories you need in order for someone to basically like apologize to you, right? Or to like make things better. Like, what do you need? So it's like knowing what you need in order to like make the situation better is super important. So like some of the categories are like making restitution, or like asking for forgiveness, or like getting accountability, making a plan about it, and there's one other category. Anyways, it's super helpful to know that what you need in order for you to kind of like overcome this, right? There's also, on a side note, there's also another test that you could do to check your anger. It's called an anger assessment. I will also link that below. I think it would be super helpful for everyone to know like how they deal with their anger and deal with this kind of situation, to know like how to move forward from it. So it's like there's good ways and bad ways to like deal with your anger. And I think for both of these books, both of these tests, he has like a book that you could actually read on about it more. Definitely for the anger one, I know there's a book. I'm not sure about the apology, but I'm sure there probably is definitely more information about like how to like apologize to someone in order to like recover and make things better. One of the things that I found out, actually I remember the first time I did this test, the quiz, my number one, I think, was forgiveness. Like, I need someone else to ask for my forgiveness. But when I just did this test recently, right before this video, to just check the different categories, mine was like making restitution was like the first above the asking for forgiveness. So I think it like changes like over time, but also like what you need more so in certain times than others is really important. So one is like to think about when you're going to confront this person or talk to this person or just to communicate with this person that, you know, what you shared really hurt my feelings, then also be clear in your mind what you need in order to like overcome it, okay? And it's really difficult. I found that of all the categories that came up there, asking for forgiveness was pretty tough for people to do, which is actually why a lot of my, because at least this is what I expect from other people, like it's like high up on my thing. So it's like, and usually people are really embarrassed or like nobody does this where they ask for forgiveness or request for forgiveness. So it's like, I'm like, damn, of all the apology languages, like I feel like mine's like a little bit tough, like in like people really have to like lower themselves to like they have to seek my forgiveness in order for me to be able to forgive them. Oh, I think the last category was like accountability. I'm like, really? I don't really need people to be accountable for their actions. Like, it's like, no, they need to ask for my forgiveness. That's like, that seems to be higher. And I was like, damn, that's like not, I'm like, it's not important on my list. Cause I know people are evolving and changing like all the time, but like, if you can show to the other person like what you need, then it's like you give it to them and then they're like, fine, right? Even though mentally, if I'm thinking about it, I'm like, accountability, especially when it comes to my clients, like I talk majorly about accountability, but it seems like it's not important for me to, when people are apologizing to me, that's something that I need. So it's like important for you to like, even though it's like, it might be something that you think you would prefer more to hear from the other person, is like, take this test and just like double check with yourself to see like, oh, I actually need this more for the apology than something else. So that's like also an awareness practice to know like not only when you got triggered about the whole situation and you've already done reflection, you've identified, do you get logical first, emotional? So in this circumstances, you talked about first emotion being to cry, like getting emotional. However, I don't think that this is your normal way of dealing with conflict. I think for this situation, it impacted you a lot greater than other situations, so that your first emotion that you went to was crying. But it's also something for you to reflect on, whether if you see this as a pattern of all conflicts that usually happen, it upsets you so much that your first emotion is like to cry, and then like once the cry and the release has been done, then you can sort of kind of like see how to like reconcile the situation. So it's really important for you to know that like pattern sort of situation. So now coming to another thing that I wanted to share when it comes to this is that human beings have 6 needs, okay? They usually have 6 needs. And if their needs are not being met in a certain situation, then it's usually where they will like leave a situation. It'll be like their threshold, their breaking point, and be like, that's it, I'm done, right? And I think this would be helpful for just people to know, whether it's like in a normal circumstances or in a situation of conflict, for you to know that like we need to meet people's needs. We not only need to have our own needs met, but we also need to meet other people's needs, right? So just to go over what the basic human needs are: certainty, uncertainty, significance, connection or love. And usually people forego love because it's too difficult and too hard, that they settle for connection instead. Then you have growth, and curiosity really like feeds growth. So to be curious about things, like, why is this happening? Why is this? And even to be curious in a conflict, like that's like you can use that, right? And then 6 is like purpose, right? So it's like certainty, uncertainty, significance, connection, and love. 5 is growth, and 6 is purpose. So usually when it comes to these things, and people will literally die for their needs. Men usually tend to die if you don't give them significance. They'll be willing to die for significance. Like if you make them feel good, you lick their egos, like, you know, like that's like what like keeps them alive, right? Strokes their ego. And then you have women who usually are willing to like die for love. Like men are also willing to die for love, but it's more so significance. Like if they feel significant to do something, like being like heroic, dying for their country, all these things, like that's something that they would demonstrate their love in. And that's something that they would be willing to like die for, to fulfill their needs. So it's super important to remember these sort of things. Now, there's more. I'm going to leave like a couple links by Tony Robbins that he goes deeper into the 6 human needs and provides like example. I've listened to this talk like so many times. It's always gold to me. Like I can never get sick of it. So I highly recommend you watch it. I've also actually recently in the Yoga Avec Moi Global Nutrition Conference, Dr.Dorothy Dexter, I will also link that, also mentioned it when it comes to eating foods. And her topic was on the psychology of nutrition. And she talked about the 6 human needs and then a process of how to like overcome like nutrition and stuff. So if that's also of interest to you, please go watch that. So coming back to our situation of like, where do I think one of your needs was not met? So this person in a public situation made you feel less than, right? So on the significance kind of scale, she like kind of puts you down in a public situation. And that's usually quite embarrassing for people. So it's not surprising that you would feel sad, or that like emotion like came up. So it's like not something for you to judge yourself on. Like it's a need that we have to feel significant, and that if we were to answer something in like a group of people, you just, at least you want respect, right? But if like as soon as you speak, someone just shuts you down, like, and like basically in a tonal manner or whatever, like makes you feel like you don't, what you say or do does not matter, or is insignificant, or is not right, then obviously it's gonna affect you in like a whole different way, right? So that's something for us to like think about in terms of, not only do you want to think about, all right, so what was one of maybe her needs that were not being met in the moment, right? And maybe perhaps the comment that you made her feel a disconnection. So number 4, she needed to feel connected with you, and what you said basically was a disruption of that. So on her part, it could have been that she needed connection, which made her not fulfill your need, which was of significance, right? So it's like, not only when it comes to yourself do I want you to identify, all right, what is one of my needs that is not being met right now? And then like how, and all of these 6 needs, you have positive ways to go about getting it, negative ways to go about getting it, and neutral ways to go about getting it. What you want to do is to seek positive ways. Like what are ways in which you can actually meet several of your needs at the same time and it be like positive? That's like usually where an addiction happens. Like it's like you become addicted to doing that thing because it meets your your certainty, it meets your significance, it meets your purpose, and then you're like, oh my gosh, like I have so many needs in one situation that's making me like basically fulfill it. So it's like also thinking about whether it's a good habit or a bad habit that you want to develop later on. It's like, think about what are the needs that it fulfills and run through it through all of these 6 categories and see if it like does it. And as many things as you do, you want to try to positively find ways to do it and eliminate the negative ways that you go about trying to find certainty and uncertainty and significance. And just like an example, it's like one way that you know you can match your certainty is by not being in a relationship, because you don't have to be hurt. You have control over it. You're like, I'm not going to be in a relationship. So you have that level of certainty that nobody's going to hurt you. But then you also, your other needs, like connection and love, or like wanting to grow in a relationship, those needs are not being met. So it's important for you to kind of like see in one situation, you might meet one need, but then the other ones are kind of like not there. And so you want to try as much as possible to think of, all right, well, is not being in a relationship really going to fulfill all of my needs? Or is there maybe a different way that I can try to find fulfill my need of having certainty? Like, what is another thing that is a positive thing that will not deprive me of love and relationship and growth and perhaps purpose, like to be in that relationship, then like, you know, fulfill my one need of being certain. And sometimes certainty is like such a big need for people that usually certainty, uncertainty, and significance, these 3 we want to find are like top 2 ones that we can focus on, so that we know that it's like, what are the things that are important to us, and that when we're doing something, we can make sure that those are the things that drive us. So a lot of times that if somebody suddenly stops giving us significance, that's going to really throw us off balance. And then you realize that that connection is lost, that growth is not there, that purpose is not there, and everything basically falls apart. So identifying these 6 human needs and really taking time to like learn more about it is going to be where, especially in a SOS emergency sort of situation, you'll be able to see like how you kind of like can basically overcome this situation. So I want you to use these 6 human needs to see how you can rectify this whole situation and understand it a little bit better, your side, their side, and then kind of like use the apology quiz to see what you need afterwards. After you've reflected a whole bunch to see, all right, what were they feeling? How were you feeling? Maybe this was just a very simple, like, little conflict that, like, now you feel nothing about, so it's totally fine. But if it's still bothering you, make sure you, like, deal with all of those different aspects of things. Like, identifying first, just getting to know your landscape, emotional landscape of conflict is going to be really helpful. And second is to like really, that whole little child situation is like really make sure that that's dealt with first. And you want to make sure that you are protecting her at all times, because usually our inner child was not protected in situations when we were younger. We felt helpless. And so this like feeling of, some people call this like learned helplessness, or just like feeling victimized. You want to make sure that you have a conversation with your inner child about, what is this really about? How is this to do with our childhood? Like, when you already know that practice and you have like gotten to know yourself on multiple different layers, then the other strategies that I mentioned in this video will be helpful for you to kind of see like, all right, how do we overcome this situation? Or like, what would have been a positive strategy to go about to kind of like deal with it? And ultimately, and especially this analysis of human needs, if you are in your amygdala, which is like the stress response and stuff like that, you don't have access to be like, all right, let me just like really squeeze my brain hard and just be like, what need is it that they need? What need is it that I need? Like, you don't have that brain capacity for that. So this is the identifying the human needs is now when things are a bit more calm and you've had some time to process and kind of that emotional release is gone. And then you want to go back to it and be like, all right, what the hell? What just happened? What just happened? You know? And then go about it in that way. So I hope this video was helpful for you, and I hope there was something that you learned. If there's anything that you wanted me to clarify more on, please let me know. Like and subscribe this with this video if you liked it. Leave a question if you have more. If you would like me to answer something else to do with this video, or any other questions that you had about like how to like overcome certain things, like when it comes to emotions, I'd be happy to share my thoughts with you. And so I will leave it here, and I will see you in the next video. Bye, guys.